China has implemented a zero tariffs policy for the developing world in countries where Beijing has existing diplomatic ties, and that includes 33 African nations. China is the first major global economy to take such a step. Let's talk more about tariffs and the threat of tariffs, and joining us for that is Arthur Dong, a distinguished teaching professor at Georgetown University's McDonough School of Business. Arthur, always good to see you. Thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me on, Sean.
I want to get your take on what Trump is saying about China's, firstly, I'm sorry, your take first on China's zero tariff policy toward nations that are developing.
Yes, I mean, amongst those 33 nations that you had previously mentioned in Africa, this is being greeted extremely warmly by those member nations as they now have unfettered access to the Chinese economy. Now, in the short run, I do not see this to be a game changer, but in the long run, it certainly will be a game changer as many of these economies start to exploit the opportunities that the potential of the Chinese economy offers them. And right now, it's primarily centered in agricultural products as well as minerals. But in time, you're going to see more manufactured products come out of these nations and certainly being very, very openly welcomed into the Chinese economy.
Your reaction to President-elect Donald Trump's threat to BRICS nations that if you get away from the U.S. dollar, you're going to pay the price?
Yes, certainly. This is an unconventional president in many ways. And the speech that he uses is oftentimes tinged with exaggeration. But I think you have to take those words somewhat seriously. A 100% tariff would be unprecedented in scope. But I think the nations that he is targeting amongst the BRICS nations, if they have a desire to create an alternative mechanism for monetary settlement outside of the SWIFT system or an alternative currency to the U.S. dollar, I think this is something that incoming President Trump is keeping a very close eye on.
You know, Arthur, in part, you make a living by teaching and working with some of the really bright young business minds in the United States. Let's talk about these tariff proposals, if you will, and compare them to previous action that Trump has taken. And a lot of people are basically taking the stance right now, well, that's Donald Trump. He's threatening this because he wants this. But talk about that and what's at stake. And I have to ask you here, do you think he really understands the way tariffs work?
I'm not quite sure he really understands how tariffs work. If you take the 25% tariffs that were imposed on Chinese manufactured products during his administration, and now the threat of an additional 25% increase across the board on Chinese manufactured exports, that would imply that for an American who's buying a $100 pair of Nike shoes, those shoes are now going to cost $150 in total. So he was elevated to his second presidency on the basis of American displeasure over the inflationary impact that occurred during the first half of the Biden administration. So if he should impose these tariffs, well, it's going to be the American people who are going to suffer the greatest, and particularly those at the bottom of the pyramid whose dollars really need to be stretched. And so there will be an immediate reaction in terms of the prices of goods as American consumers confront increased tariffs, which are only going to hurt their pocketbook as well as hurt their material comforts and the ability to buy the things that they need to satisfy their daily lives.
You know, Arthur, I think you make some wonderful points there. And talking about the Nike shoes, that's something that is out there. It's discretionary. But during the election, people complained about the price of eggs, the price of meat, the price of poultry, everything. Talk about how these tariffs are likely to impact the U.S. consumers. If you were mad about 50 cents or $1 more for eggs, what are you going to be thinking a year from now?
Yes, I mean, the basic American consumer, they spend a lot more of their income on basic life necessities such as food, clothing, and shelter. Now, food prices have moderated of late, and many of these food items, although, you know, the United States produces a good part of what feeds America, there are many imported foods that come into the American marketplace. But it's going to be those sort of things that consumers, you know, desire, such as clothing and shoes, household items, all those things. Consumer electronics, all those things are going to increase in price. and it's going to, the transmission mechanism via tariffs are going to be very severe and very quick, and Americans are going to get sticker shock very soon.
Okay, so which sectors are the most vulnerable, and small businesses? It seems like they could really be pounded here.
Yeah, small businesses to a large extent, if they're selling any product such as textiles and clothing, well, they're fundamentally coming from foreign producers. We make very little of those things here in America. And the sectors that are going to be hit hardest are retail, meaning, companies like Walmart and Target, Nike, as mentioned, companies like Apple. These are all sort of big names in the American economy. All of them are going to take a hit. Household goods, clothing, textiles, shoes, you name it. Many of those things are going to go up in price.
Arthur, you do not paint a pretty picture, but we certainly appreciate your time and your frankness. Thanks much. Arthur Dong.